allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Brian Carrier, Mayor's Representative.
In Poisson, Ward 5.
Faith Fontaine at large.
Connie Brown, Superintendent. Karen Matthew, Ward 3.
Pam Hart, Ward 2.
Brian Belknap, Ward 4.
David Simpson at large.
All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda is, as always, the approval of tonight's agenda, which also includes the minutes for the September 16th meeting and the certificated nominations for the following 4 individuals below. Can I have a motion to entertain tonight's consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Pam, and I heard Brian Carrier as a second. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Public participation this evening. I don't believe we've opened the community room either. Give a moment. Open. Seeing none. All right. Moving past public participation, we're going to move right into this evening's presentation on the Pro AV system that is being installed. I had to go to the high school today to drop off some items for my son, and there were 3 Pro AV vehicles parked right in the front. So
Big crew today, big crew.
big crew today. Mr. Robinson here helping us out with it.
All right, so let's start with the nuts and bolts of where we're at with the installation. It's going very well. I spoke with Mike Libby this afternoon. He's the project manager for us, and he gave me an update as of where we stand today. So going extremely well. They fully expect to be done hopefully Friday, and if not, one day into next week. They are available to work Monday, and I do have somebody from my team who can get them into the building and get them where they need to go. So EL will be done, if not Friday, then sometime during Monday. I'm meeting with Mike at AMS on Friday morning to do a walkthrough there. We're going to basically go through the classrooms and make sure that he's comfortable with where cameras, microphones, everything else needs to be set up in each classroom at AMS. And they'll start AMS as soon as they're done at EL next week. AMS is getting every room done because they are in a mode of students staying in one place and teachers moving. So it makes sense to have every space done so that anybody who needs to use it in any particular room can just plug their laptop in and go. Yeah, Pam, go ahead.
Sorry. So AMS is going to have every room. Does EL have every room also?
In this first round, we did the people who volunteered to be in the first go-round. We will be going back through. We're going to go through and do all of the volunteers at all of the schools first, and then we'll be going back through and filling in any rooms that didn't get done. So the end result will be that all classrooms will have the equipment.
So how many at EL so far?
I don't have that spreadsheet right here. They are somewhere in the high 30s right now. The total on the first round is just over 40 classrooms. And they will be done all of those by Friday. They should have another big crew in there on Friday because they can have free access. Their insurance won't let them operate in classrooms when there are students present because they're pulling ceiling tiles and working overhead, and obviously they don't want to have something end up falling on somebody's head. So they've been incredibly flexible. We worked out, and Scott and his staff were very helpful with this. We worked out a plan whereby the high school designates a room each day that students go somewhere else, and that room's available to Pro AV starting at 11. They get in there and they work on that room, and they stay through 7 in the evening so they can keep up with their 4 rooms a day with a regular team. Today they had extra people there, so they were able to get through more rooms today. Middle school, I talked to Sean McGaw. The plan will be similar. They'll try to get one room starting at 11, work through 7 so they can get 4 a day. Elementary schools with the later end time may be a little bit more tricky, but we'll work with administrators to find a way to get that done as efficiently as possible. So I do have some classroom video to show you. I've been up at the high school for the last few days capturing some video in classrooms where the system's been set up in use. And I went in looking to sort of capture the exciting story of the shiny new technology. And what I actually came away with is that the technology is invisible, as it should be. What you're going to see is 4 teachers teaching their classes in pretty much the way they would in a regular, normal year. The only difference being that there are some students who are not in the classroom who are participating. And what you'll notice on the video is that the sound quality is pretty poor. I mean, I was using my phone in a handheld to capture the video. And, you know, you've got fans in the windows, you've got, you know, the usual background noise of the air circulation, all of those kinds of things, which we obviously need right now. So the sound's pretty poor. You don't really hear as much as you'd want to. But the students at home are hearing perfectly what the students in the classroom and what the teacher's saying, because that microphone in the ceiling is really good at capturing. And by the same token, the students who are at home are very, very audible in the classroom because they're good speakers. And in fact, one of the teachers made the observation that some of the students who are perhaps less loud in the classroom, less sort of willing to speak loudly, come across better when they're in remote, because now they're sitting there just speaking to their computer, and everybody in the classroom can hear what they have to say. And sometimes they have a lot to say, but it's not as well heard when they're in person in the classroom. So sort of an unintended consequence of a system like this is perhaps giving a voice to somebody who would not be as willing to speak out sitting in a classroom full of other students. So with that said, we're going to start in an AP English class. This is Mrs. Lathrop's classroom. There are 4 students in this class, 2 of them physically present in person and 2 of them at home. And I've cut out the sort of teacher direction at the beginning, and it's really just gets into showing you the student conversation that happens. What they're doing is they are reading sample AP essays and then scoring them on a rubric. And really, it's mostly student voice. The teacher, I think, speaks once in the video just to tell them where they are in terms of being on track with how they're scoring or not scoring. Other than that, it's all the students talking, and it's just this conversation that's happening between 4 students who aren't all in the same place. So with that said, hopefully we can get the sound loud enough. And we have no sound. I can probably make the sound come out here and play it through this microphone. Try that.
Yes. Okay. All right. So you guys can go ahead, work together, discussing, talking about those essays, and we'll see what you come up with and how it compares to my scores. I'd give it a 0, 3, 1.
Oh, for all of them?
No, for just the number 1.
Yeah, just the first one.
Yeah. What did you say?
I would say 0 for the thesis too, just because they kind of restate the prompt, and they don't really give a thesis.
Yeah, he kind of like blew right through it. Like, it didn't really have an actual claim to it. He just said that Gatsby is the one that deceives, and that was about it. It didn't really list like an intro to the evidence in his thesis.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I'm saying a 0 for the thesis as well. He does kind of like present a motive for it, but I think that's the only part of it that he really gets. He doesn't talk about, you know, what the deception is that he might start talking about. And he doesn't really describe how that might interact with the work as a whole.
So I'm not really slow reader, so the second category I didn't really touch on, but like the sophistication, I just feel like he or they kind of like generally described it. They didn't really go into.
Yes, it is. It is. Yep.
Destiny, did you have anything else?
Oops, that's the next one. Sorry. Go back.
So how is this camera moving this way? Like, where is this camera?
So the camera's up in the back of the room, and you'll see in the next one, the teacher actually moves the camera, and I think we can move on to the next one now. I
Yeah.
think that you got the sense of what was going on in that classroom and the way that was working between the students at home and students in class. So the next one is Mrs. Town's class. It's a social studies classroom. And at one point in this video, you'll actually see her using a map that she's got sort of leaning up against the board, and she actually zooms the camera in onto the map so that the students at home can see it. It's way up in the back of the room. It's actually smaller than these cameras here. And the teacher just has a remote that they have presets that they can move it to just by pushing a number button, or they can just move it manually. There's sort of like a D-pad, like a game controller type of a thing that they just can move it around and zoom it in and out. So they can pretty much put it wherever they want it in the classroom. Mrs. Town said that she was going to use all 128 presets and just have different things on the walls in her classroom so that the things that the students would normally look at when they were in class, she could focus the camera in on them. This is her social studies class, and you'll see her sort of interacting with the students in the room at the same time, and then checking in with some of them at home, and just a very normal classroom lesson, talking with different students, whether they're there in person or not.
Destiny, did you have anything else?
No.
No?
I'm the same stuff.
The same stuff. Excellent, excellent. All right, people. So, what we don't see in the marine traffic, if you noticed, is if you go to the north, we are not seeing any routes that are coming through the Arctic yet. There's only very, very, very few oil tankers there, right? Primarily because you can't get through. Mr. Dimitri, Destiny, are you on week 4 of your syllabus?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so, doing these essential questions to get them out of the way, how many of you completed them? Right on. Dimitri, did you complete these?
I have one question left.
One question. Not bad, not bad, not bad. How many of you had a time trying to find what the indigenous groups were part of each state? That was a little bit of a problem for you? Can you talk to me about that? Like,
Well, I came to see you and I figured out, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what the indigenous ones were. I wasn't sure what they were. I thought that they were the councils when I was looking on the website.
yeah, so it gets really, really mixed up. Let me clarify a couple of things for all of you, right? That what you're looking at is a website for something called the Arctic Council. And the Arctic Council are the ones that are in charge of being able to, kind of talk about policy in the Arctic and make these decisions in the Arctic, right? So as part of that council, we have, of course, the 8 Arctic states, the 13 non-Arctic states. So what type of countries are we talking about with non-Arctic states? What do we have? Were we able to find it? Yes, Frank.
France, Germany, Italian,
Correct, right? So if we are talking about non-Arctic states,
Yeah,
they
the
are
top
That's what the kids are seeing at
investments
home, is
and
that
players
piece.
in the Arctic.
Correct. That top is what the students at home can see. And then the other two below that are actually the students, both of whom have their video turned off. And that was something I noticed that a lot of teachers were doing when they were presenting. They would have students have their video off, and then they would just turn it on if the student was actually speaking. Much in the way that we, tend to mute when we're in a Zoom meeting unless we have something to say.
So there's a part in there where she's highlighting stuff, and she's talking about, there's a map, and she's kind of going, does the child have that on their computer as well, or are they seeing it through?
So at that point, she was in screen sharing mode when she was going through the syllabus with students and highlighting. I don't know for certain, but I would expect that they would also have had access to that website. That was actually Oil Tankers in real time. It's on a website, so my supposition is that she would have had that link in the either syllabus or Google Classroom so that students could pull that up on their own web browser at home as well.
Okay.
What's the feedback been so far from teachers who have had the opportunity to be utilizing this in their rooms?
So everybody seems very happy with it. One of the other teachers that I have some video from, Mr. Gibson's classroom, he actually said to me that if it weren't for this system, he would not be able to cover all of his material in now that he's reduced down to 1/4 and hour-long classes. He says he needs all 4 of the days, and he has every student who's at home zooming in. And they use that time. Same thing with Mrs. Hefty, who's one of the other people that I was in her classroom.
So hopefully this is, I think Dave spoke to this a couple weeks ago. I'm not doubling what I'm doing Monday, Tuesday. I'm not doubling again. It's not Monday, Tuesday again on Thursday, Friday. I'm teaching 4 days. Okay.
There are definitely different approaches. Mrs. Lathrop, the English teacher, has just the cohort and the fully remote students on a given day, but the other students are working independently. I mean, that's an AP English class, so they have a lot of reading and writing to do, so they use those days to do other work. So she's not repeating the same things over and over necessarily.
How about so if I walk into a classroom and the system is suddenly there in my room, how user-friendly is there? Is there tech people who come in who can support me, or is it pretty user-friendly?
It is. I mean, we've certainly worked through some issues where sometimes the camera wouldn't connect, and we've given teachers some, easy tips to get things going. Mm-hmm. But once you have the thing plugged in and the camera is recognized by Zoom, if you know how to use Zoom, you can use the system. Where it might be challenging if you're going into a room that's not yours is if you wouldn't have necessarily all of the presets that you would expect to have. But remember that you can move the camera just by sort of manipulating this thing on the remote, and it's really easy to do. I mean, it really is sort of point and click kind of a thing.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for Peter? Good, thank you.
There is certainly more video if anybody would like to see it, but...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Peter, can you talk to the conversation that we had last week, I think it was, around, we had the initial challenge that we had with the Apple Play, and then now we're moving to
hardwire. Sure, yeah, good, yes.
So people are aware.
Yeah, so what we were doing is, as I like to put it, we were sort of triple dipping on the network, right? So we have a Zoom meeting going on, which means that my laptop's got to talk to Wi-Fi to make that happen. We're also sending video out through USB to or getting video in rather from the camera. And then some teachers were also playing YouTube videos, which they were screen sharing with students at home over the Zoom meeting. So you've got this massive amount of information trying to go in both directions through the Wi-Fi connection. And I think regardless of what you have on the back end, and we are slated to get an upgrade from Network Maine on our overall bandwidth, but regardless of what you've got on the back end, you've basically got a traffic jam going on right there in the classroom between the laptop and the access point. So what we've encouraged teachers to do is to try to remove some of those pieces. So if you want students to watch a YouTube video, give them the URL. Have them watch the YouTube video on their own laptop and then come back to the Zoom once they've done that. If you can, and the system is designed to allow this, plug into the projector directly rather than using the Apple TV. So we've taken that leg out of the problem. And we found that once we've done as many of those things as are feasible, that really tends to help. There's also sometimes the case you'll find that there are an awful lot of windows and browser tabs and things open on that laptop that the teacher perhaps didn't realize that they still had open, and once they sort of clean things out and start with a fairly clean slate, that really helps too.
Now, EL is not a young building, and, you know, this is relatively new technology, and even with internet and all that, does every part of Edward Little have the capability to have this and to have the internet and to be able to use that? Or are there spots at Edward Little that may not be able to have internet?
We've actually put a lot of investment into our Wi-Fi networks district-wide over the past couple of years. We were able to get 80% reimbursement through E-rate for exactly that kind of infrastructure. So we opted to replace all of our Wi-Fi networks with up-to-date gear. And our latest E-rate project actually involved adding some additional access points to fill in the holes that we discovered after we had done the first installation. So even though it's an older building, we have very good Wi-Fi coverage pretty much everywhere.
Well, I was going to say one of the videos you had up earlier, I think Mrs. Hefty, I think she's way down, maybe in the basement tucked in.
Actually that's in the new wing. But the whole building has had good Wi-Fi coverage through the MLTI network since we had MLTI laptops at the high school. That was part of the contract with the state, was that they would install Wi-Fi that provided coverage in every learning space.
So every learning space at Edward Little has the capability.
There's pretty much, there's almost an access point in, I would say certainly in every other room, and then there are also places where there's one in every room where conditions required there to be an extra one to fill in a hole. So we do have very solid coverage, and that's something that we very much pay attention to. When we first started using a lot of Zoom, we were having some issues up in the social studies wing where there were a lot of dropouts and that kind of thing. We worked with our network consultants and figured out what was going on and made some changes, and that resolved itself.
Any other questions? Brian, do you have a question? Dave? No?
I do have a question, for Karen or Dr. Brown. Several meetings ago, this committee asked that Edward Little be the top priority. And I'd like to know when that was amended to only put cameras in rooms with volunteer teachers. What's the plan to have full, the entire school with this functionality so kids can get Zoom in or whatever the terminology is?
So I think when I look back on my notes, we are following what we had, the conversation being in August is that we would start putting the system into the rooms first for teachers who said, yeah, put one in my room right away, and then moved on. So that's what they're working on right now, still working in the volunteer rooms.
Right.
Heading to AMS because they want to be fully supported, and then heading back to EL to finish up the rest of the rooms. Did I miss your question?
My recall is that we asked Edward Little to be the first priority to have this installed. And I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, people please correct me. Was have this in every classroom at Edward Little.
It is. So my notes.
It is to people who volunteer to use it.
Well, my notes just indicated where they're going to be installed first, how they were being installed first. So my notes indicate volunteer rooms first, then AMS, then back to finish the rest of the rooms at EL. That's the notes that I had written down. I can go back and check the video of the night that we made that decision.
Mr. Robinson, could you tell me when do you expect the entirety of the Edward Little facility to have this capability in every classroom?
I don't have that answer right now. I don't know how long AMS will take until we do the walkthrough on Friday.
Is every classroom in the AMS getting this?
Yes, because there are enough teachers there who said, I want it, and because teachers move between classrooms rather than stay in one place, they really need to have it in every classroom.
Thank you.
And if you like, Dave, I can go back and look through the video just to make sure that I didn't capture this wrong. But those are the notes that I had captured that night during our conversation. We're all there. If anyone else recalls it differently than I do, or wrote it down differently than I did, then please jump in. But I'm certainly happy to go back. But at the end, we will be completely outfitted in both buildings.
Yes, we'll completely outfit it in all buildings in the end.
So if we can get an update on when EL will be fully equipped, just because I think that's very important to me too.
We will get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Robinson. Okay, moving on, superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. I have several items that I'd like to update you on, and I'm going to share my airtime with a couple of my colleagues. The first is a COVID update. I believe we've kept you pretty well informed regarding different instances occurring in the buildings regarding COVID, and Michelle has been our point person for that. And so, Michelle, could you give us a very quick summary of some of the items that we've dealt with in the last couple of weeks?
Thank you, Connie. So you may be aware, but we thought it might be important for you to have a quick update on a recent case that came forward, a student who had tested positive, who is an AMS student. And so last week, we learned of this early in the week. On Tuesday, we began our morning implementing the standard operating procedure that came out that we talked about previously from the CDC Division of Surveillance. So we implemented that. Mr. McGaw, who is the assistant principal at AMS, and Deputy Chief Fifield and myself began to work through that protocol, starting with contacting parents for more information. From there, it led to tracing and the contact of the state school nurse who contacts CDC. In that discussion with the parents, it was derived that there was another person in the household who had displayed COVID-like symptoms previous week, and that there were other people in the household that were showing symptoms. And so that information that we gather around what we know about this situation from the parents, in the contact tracing, who would be considered a close contact, and I'll talk about that in a minute if you'd like some information on it. All that is in preparation of when the phone call to the state school nurse happens. At that point, all that information is shared with her, Emily Poland, and she contacts the Maine CDC. At that point, they look at that information and contact us directly. We then give more specifics around the tracing, who the exact people are that we've identified, answer some of their questions, and then they contact the family as well to make determinations of whether the investigation is going to open up or not. So at that point, we, after that happened, we were notified by the CDC that the case at AMS, the positive case that had tested, was a case that was opening. An investigator had been assigned, and they advised us on what we needed to do at that point in terms of the close contacts that were related to school. That would be students and staff, and their obligation to go into quarantine at that point, and the number of days that they'd be in quarantine. And they figure all of that out according to their epidemiological information that they gather around when symptoms start or when the positive test occurred, and then they work their 14 days out from that, and that's the date that we go with in terms of a quarantine, and communicating that with families and with staff who are affected by it. They also informed us that the student, the other person in the household who was an EL student who had not been tested but had showed symptoms, the case was being opened as a presumptive positive. That was a new term to us. Not that we couldn't figure out what it meant, but we wanted to know what CDC meant when they said presumptive positive, and what that more importantly meant for us in terms of moving forward in terms of quarantine obligations. So we were told that presumptive positive meant the same pathway as a positive case. And so we were going to move forward with the date that they assigned for the quarantine, how long the quarantine needed to be taken place, and who was going to be involved with that. At that point, we had identified the students. We were prepared for that. The students in classes and staff in classes. This student happened to be on a team playing an extracurricular sport, and so we were informed at that time that that team needed to go into quarantine as well, along with the coaches. So our great staff began making those contacts. That means at that point, every parent we are contacting, at this point, we're contacting every parent by phone to make sure that they have the information. Like to say the story ended there, but it didn't. The next day we were notified, Mr. Anier was notified by the CDC, letting him know that the student who had, from EL, who had been the presumptive positive, had been tested and the test results came back negative, so that they were closing that case and they were releasing, reversing actually the quarantine, the need to quarantine for the EL students. So that I'm hoping that that's not too confusing. That's the Reader's Digest version of what happened. It took place over many, many hours, as you can imagine. One small side asterisk was that the students you might have heard from some of your neighbors or constituents, that students who worked, the quarantine was reversed for that case. We were reminded of guidance that requirements that the CDC has. If someone is tested, goes and has a test, they are to quarantine until their results come back. So some parents who were involved in this responded quickly and responsibly. They felt they needed to go have a test, their student have a test. And so some students who didn't get a test came back to school, but those students who went and had a test needed to stay in quarantine during that time. So I wanted to explain that to you because you may have heard these things, and it's sometimes difficult to connect dots, but I wanted to give you that information. Questions on that? Things I can answer?
Did any of the students that had the test that stay in quarantine, do we know if they're positive, any of them came back to positive, or were they all negative?
What I can tell you right now is that we've had no other reports of any positive tests since that time from anybody at the school, or any illnesses reported associated.
Okay, thank you.
If I might, Chairperson, Michelle, would you just touch on very briefly, because I think there's some confusion around what exactly is a close contact. If I was just in a class and someone had a family member, do I now need to quarantine? Because those examples are happening around us right now.
So close contact, as defined by the CDC, is they ask us to identify anyone who has been closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Or they also consider close contacts anyone who is in the same classroom at this point. And in that situation, we're not really sure. I haven't been able to get full clarification. They identified the whole team, and I know the team was practicing some the safety precautions. So I'm not really sure how that came about fully, but they felt after talking and doing their investigation that the team went into quarantine. But I can't give you more specific on that. Doesn't mean, what it doesn't mean, I think what you're saying, Connie is referring to, is that if I was in a class with a person who was quarantining, that's not a close contact. The close contact is a direct correlate to the person who tests positive, not to somebody who was with the person who tested positive. Unless you're in your family or a family unit, I think they look at that.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but the family member of the positive COVID student, the family member, did they test for antibodies that would say that maybe they had been positive, but now they're not anymore, but they have the antibodies?
I don't know that. I think where you're going is it doesn't sound like it, but I don't know that.
Well, it could be negative now, but it could be that this person had it and then it's gone now, but they still have the antibodies for it. That would say that they were positive at one point. And you may not be able to answer that, but I was just wondering if
I don't
that was
have that
even looked
information,
into.
but certainly there were lots of questions around that.
Okay, thank you very much. All set to move along? So the next item is really just an FYI. Shelley, you want to tell us very quickly about what NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, is, and who's part of that group, and when that is going to happen?
Sure. So, I was trying to remember what the letters stood for. I had that right. So, NAEP is a nationally given assessment that has been around for 50 years. I found out when I went on the website. And so every year, the state identifies schools in the state. They're going to participate in NAEP. And they are administering it this year. And we have been notified that 4th grade at Walton and 8th grade at AMS will participate. I kind of said to Mike and Bob, I said, you probably can't buy a winning scratch ticket, but you win the NAEP lottery. So it's an assessment that is, students will be given either the math assessment or the reading assessment. And there's a longer window this year, so I brought this so I could tell you. January 25th to March 19th. And I did contact the person at the state to ask about what the expectation was for full remote students. And what they're asking is that those students would participate in the survey part of the assessment, but not be expected to take the assessment itself. So we don't have to arrange for them to come into school to take the NAEP assessment. It would be for students who are in school.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Is that going to skew the results of the score if we're only using in-school, in-person?
So NAEP is an assessment that does like a sample size. So, and we don't get direct data back from NAEP. They release like statewide data. So we wouldn't find out how our individual students did or how Walton School did or how AMS did. It's just sort of part of this national assessment. It's part of the Department of Ed, like national department. And it's like they consider it the nation's report card to check on the progress of students in 4th and 8th grade. You'll hear it referenced every year.
Are we mandated to do this? Can we say no?
I don't know if you could or not. Connie might know, but I've never tried to say no. It's sort of like one of those things that's your duty to do, I think. Okay. It's just, we always joke about the fact that Auburn always seems to be part of the selection, and we are again this year. So we'll do as we always do. It takes 2 hours, they said, to administer. So, and I think normally we would do math. I think normally you do both math and reading. So this idea that the school would be either giving the reading or the math is like an adjustment to the schedule that's going on in school. So they have scaled it back some.
Okay. Just not a fan of assessments that don't help to drive my instruction, and it's just one more thing we're asking kids to do on top of the other assessments we ask them to do, which is why I asked, can we just say thanks but no thanks?
I'm not of the impression that we can.
I don't think it's a voluntary duty once you get tabbed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay.
So thanks. Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, the next item on my list is the Auburn School Department budget calendar. This is something I asked Adam to put together to keep us on track. You'll notice that we've already kicked off the budget development module, which is now live for administrators to put their information in. On the 18th of November, I've checked with Chairperson Matthew, and we're going to have a workshop on the process, what your goals are. We're hoping by that time we'll have a revenue forecast from the state of Maine, and they'll start making projections. As I think Mr. Carrier referenced earlier, that there has been a fairly dramatic revenue shortage here in Maine, and that will impact undeniably the general purpose aid that comes to Auburn. So that's something to keep your eyes on, because I think that will have a material impact on us down the road. I meet with all of the administrators, and you can see that here in January. In February, we'll tally things up and we'll present to you on the 24th. And then we'll start with weekly budget workshops for you here and there. And then those items also include a public hearing in April, a joint school committee city council workshop on the 19th. Some of these are approximate dates. Obviously, we need to confirm these with the council and other folks in the city. And then we end up on the 8th with a budget validation referendum. So believe it or not, it will go faster than you can blink. Here we are already in October. So this is to help me stay organized and to give you a sense of where we are in the budget development process. You've heard me say before, the budget development is an iterative process. You never stop doing budget. And for my office, you're often working in 3 budgets at once. You're working in the current budget, you're working in the proposed budget, and you're working in last year's budget as you try to tie up the audit. So just keep that in mind. Next on my list is visits to buildings. I have had the great pleasure of being in all of the buildings, or nearly all the buildings. I have read with kids at Park Ave, which was loads of fun, listening to the little guys read to me. I was asked if I was the mayor at Fairview the other day, and I said, no, I'm not the mayor, I'm superintendent. Poor Dexter didn't really know what the superintendent was, but he figured I was close enough to the mayor, so that was his guess. And it has just been an absolute joy to walk and talk to kids, to talk with teachers, to see what's going on. And I think we're really starting to hit our stride here in Auburn. Things are, I think Dave mentioned the new normal, but kids are so glad to be back in school. And it's just so apparent when I walk around in classrooms. It's really nice to see. CRF2, that will be covered as part of the Finance Committee report, so I'll just do a real light touch on that now. We have been notified that we have CRF2, COVID Relief Funds 2, that will be coming. They have all of the same restrictions that CRF1 had. There was an article today in the Sun Journal with some districts being challenged to spend the money. That's not going to be the case here. We have a good plan. We were fortunate that we have great people who got a jump on things such as the iPads and the laptops and the Pro AV, and luck was with us. And so we were able to get things and get out ahead of some other districts who are now waiting for their items to be delivered. So, you know, that worked out, point in our favor. And the last item, I actually have 2. Mr. Simpson had asked me about attendance. It was a great question. And it's on the minds of a lot of people, including me, regarding how are we taking into account kids who are working remotely? How are we making sure that we have them? You know, if we don't see kids showing up to a Zoom meeting or checking on them remotely, what happens? And we have some of those instances. And so talking with the administrators, I want to share with you what we're doing. We have an attendance liaison that works with 3 of our elementary schools, Walton, Sherwood Heights, and Washburn. And that person calls, we do home visits. We have social workers from the upper and middle levels that actually go to homes, and we contact people. Classroom teachers reach out. They make a lot of phone calls if we don't see kids in class. We have our guidance staff who, if we don't see kids, for example, at Fairview, the guidance counselor is making contact with those families. So we're really doing a full court press to make sure that if we don't see kids attending, we are reaching out to the family and trying to find out why. We are a fairly transient district, and so we have kids that move between Lewis and Auburn. We have kids that move in and out, and so we're tracking down those students as well to make sure that if they did move, that the new district where they are now residing knows that they're there. So that's another big effort of ours to make sure that whether it's a Lewiston family or someone else that we know that they've moved to, that someone reaches out and makes sure that those kids are in school. Those are some of the things that we're doing. And just on the subject of enrollment, I thought you might find this interesting. I did. So in your packet, you have our enrollment count from October 1st. I think most folks know October 1st is the official date that the state uses to set our general purpose aid. This is unlike any other year that we've ever had to count up the number of students. Those students are directly tied to dollars. And so we want to make sure that we count everyone possible. We are down right now 125 students over this point last year. And when you look at the count over the 2018 number, we're down about 177 students over 2018. 177, to say that correctly, 177 over 2018. So where do those kids go? One of the places that they went is people are opting to homeschool. So in 2018, we had 62 kids registered to be homeschooled students. This year, talking with the folks in my office who actually do that, we have 160 kids who are opting for homeschooling. At Fairview, our student count is 70 kids less than it was last year at this time. Some of those kids are homeschooled. Some of those kids opted to go to private schools. And that's concerning, again, because we need to know if they're coming back in 2021-22. They tell us they are. And the trick with that is typically in all the budgets I've ever done, if you staff according to the enrollments that you have, we would staff for 125 fewer students. But that may not be the case in 21-22 because the families are saying, we're going to be back. Once things go back to normal and you're in, you can expect to see us. And so we have to, one of the things as we go through the budget process is we need to be very cognizant of that. Because if we think those kids may be coming back, for example, the preschool at Fairview typically has about 60 kids. And this year they have 35. So where are those kids? We think that they are planning to come as kindergartners, but they're going to sit this one out. So I'd be happy to entertain questions regarding the data. Again, I want to thank Dave for the question. I thought it was a really good one. It was a good discussion that we had with the administrators, trying to make sure that we do in fact chase those kids to make sure that they are attending somehow.
Any questions for Dr. Brown around this?
Yeah, I do have a question, and it's maybe not exactly to the enrollment, but something that's resonated for me for quite some time, actually, since our Friday meeting when we had to take 4 days off we had to take it off. I can't remember what it was, in August at some point. But we had done 2 rounds of surveys to parents, and here's I can say some nights it's like what I think about. That we had, at that point, 737 kids, or 21%, were blank on the survey. So there's a huge cohort of families that were undecided. There were 142 that were blank, 77 that were unsure. So it's a good chunk of kids. And I was chatting with Brian earlier, it's just like, are those kids in school? Like, how did we reach out to those kids when they never made a choice? Like, we gave them the choice. We had to amend it, of course, with the DOE, but the school started 2 weeks later. How do we reach out to those, several hundred kids?
So what I can share with you is that I know that every building, all the way from the high school down to the little folks, called, classroom teachers called, administrators called, and shared with them that you've been assigned to this cohort, you're going on these days, and please confirm that with us.
All right. I appreciate that. I didn't say it out of suspicion. It was concern. It's like, what? Because that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions regarding enrollment or attendance? All right, and I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Chairperson's report. So I have a few things that I need some support or some help or conversation from the committee on. The evening of September 22nd, so I'm going to start with, change this a little bit in the order, the MSMA, Maine School Management Association Regional Report. This is a group of board chairs that meet regionally, and so there are meetings that happen every, I think, 4 or 5 times a year. And it was an opportunity to get together with Steve Bailey, who you all know, We discussed the reopening plans of our schools, as well as received some clarification around some of the latest guidance on the CRF funds, some of the things that we could and could not spend the money on. So it was a great opportunity to brainstorm ideas on how to allocate those funds while thinking ahead for budget shortfalls that will be inevitably coming our way. So I can tell you right now, you can't find a Bluebird bus anywhere because everyone's buying up the Bluebirds. Everyone had that idea. So it was just a great opportunity to hear school reopening plans, how things were going in different districts. Auburn was not unique in anything that we've gone through. It was pretty much echoed by other school chairs as well, as far as just making sure you have enough staffing, make sure you have enough ed techs, make sure you have enough coverage, enough PPE, all that good stuff. So that was a great opportunity to attend that, which led into, and it was part of your onboarding package, coming up on October 30th as well as the 31st, there is a delegate assembly that is going to be happening. And so I'm going to flip to that. You had some idea of what the MSBA Delegate Assembly is, what it does, how it is a sort of an advisory board, a governing board for school boards, and how they report to the legislature. So there was a great description of what the purpose of the MSBA Delegate Assembly was. Does anyone have any questions on that? I think this is something that's been around a while, comes around every October. So from that, they are proposing 4 different resolutions, and the 4 resolutions were also included in your onboarding packet. The resolutions this year that will be discussed and sort of decisions based on feedback from school committee to this delegate will be conversations around the development of distant learning plans, as well as building stronger family support for education, equity in education, and then board meetings with remote participation. So what I am asking for is whoever we decide, because we have to nominate someone to attend this meeting, which is October 30th at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's a Friday afternoon, to give this person our feedback on these proposals. And then one of us, whoever that might be, would bring the feedback on the proposals. The way I can kind of see this as a time frame works out is that at our next meeting on the 21st, we would nominate a delegate. I'm happy to take volunteers who would like to say, I will be this year's delegate to attend that meeting. If none, I'm okay to attend that as well, but I want to open it up. I'm not nominating anyone, and I'm not volunteering myself yet, and unless anyone else wants to jump up, and some of you are chuckling, I can see that, so I've already blocked off that afternoon. But whoever this person is needs to know what you are thinking of as an individual school committee member. So it's important for you to take a little bit of time to read through those, and then we'll come back when we'll put this back on the agenda for the 21st. We'll nominate someone to attend, and then what is your feedback on these 4 different proposals? So you have a little bit of homework between now and our next meeting. This person has to be, like I said, it has to be first, second. No, you're volunteering?
No,
Okay.
no, this is not to volunteer. I want to ask a question.
Okay.
Faith's getting all excited over there. No.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really where this all leads to. So you have them ahead of time to be thinking about, then we nominate someone who brings our ideas to the delegate assembly.
My question was, do you want us to email you our suggestions on this, or do you want us to wait and we'll just talk about it?
I would prefer to have this as a public conversation. I'd really prefer for the public to absolutely hear the conversation or to hear the different proposals on that. So that will be part of our next meeting, which I believe is the 21st. It's a quick turnaround. I think the delegate has to be nominated by the 23rd. So that Wednesday, and then the delegate's nominated by the 23rd. Okay. All right. So that's part of that. Any questions on that? No? All right. If you need access to it, it was part of your onboarding package on Friday. And then the last on my report is the Edward Little Building Committee, which unfortunately I was not able to attend the Edward Little Building Community. The new Edward Little Building Committee meeting. A lot of things banging around. So I don't have an update or a report. And so I'm not sure if I can defer to you for that one, Dr. Brown.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'll keep this short. It was a short meeting. We talked about the commissioning update. We have a commissioning agent on board. Essentially what a commissioning agent does is they test all your systems as the building gets put up. So that is taking place. I'm going to skim down through these because some of these I've talked about before. The GC is a general contractor qualification. We have, 8 or 10 firms that have submitted as part of a pre-qualification bid, and they have been approved by the DOE. Most of them, you will recognize most of the names. Some of them are Maine companies, some of them are New England companies. So we already talked about the alternates. I don't want to spend more time on that if that's not necessary. And then the next meeting is going to be October 27th. Just as FYI, we go to the state board for their approval on November 4. That's a big meeting. We need to get the approval. We're going to the state board's construction committee. I think it's the 30th, Scott. And again, that's a subcommittee of the state board. And just like this committee works, they have a approval process where you go to the subcommittee and then you go to the full board for approval. And we'll be there with Harriman. I want to say it's 11 o'clock on the 4th. I have my calendar in front of me. That sounds about right. It might be 1 o'clock. But nevertheless, things are really moving, and those bids will get released. Once the state board gives their approval, they'll go out, and you'll know in mid to late January what the bids will come in at. So it'll be an exciting time. Things are really starting to move with that project.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Next on the agenda, City Council update from Superior.
A lot of the council has been focused on growth in the city and places where it could happen. And I was going to ask Dr. Brown, have you been contacted by the Eric Cousins in regards to areas of growth? They used to notify the superintendent when we had like a new apartment complex going in and things like that, just to give you a heads up of possibilities of increased enrollments in schools.
Every couple of weeks I meet with Phil Crowell and we touch upon things about that. So yes, he has briefed me on some of those things.
A lot of concern with the surrounding communities, starting to vote on things that may not be beneficial to their growth and looking to see how Auburn can capitalize on future growth for not only for economic development, but also for residential development. We've been looking at technically how many more citizens, that we could handle, more homes, apartments, and things like that. And are looking, the number seems to be that, 6,000 possibility of new residents. It could be a number that we could be looking at, which would be a very large number to be looking at as far as the increases to the school system. But, we're looking out long range and areas where they can take advantage of the current environment. So we're doing a lot of that. School committee did come up insofar as the building committee and things, just in general questions, and they were answered. They are keeping an eye on it. And that's basically been a lot of what we've been talking about.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions? Area? All right, seeing none, let's move on to committee reports. Finance Committee.
Okay. We had a meeting on the 25th through Zoom to discuss the second round of the CRF. And like the first, we were given a very specific time frame for this. Dave and I sat in on the meetings. We had a couple of questions in regards to it. But again, we were given this by the federal government through the state that we had until December 31st to be able to utilize these funds. And it's not just having ordered them, but we have to have the items in hand. It's not, we can't say, oh, we ordered them and we'll get them, you know, in December or February or like that. We have to have those items in hand. So it really drove a lot of what we were looking at in way of programs. And it sort of broke out into two different fields. One was safety and security upgrades overall, and then the other was enhanced educational instructions. And as Dr. Brown alluded to, we were basically awarded the same amount of money that we received last time, the 2.9. This is what we were told. We ended up with a little bit over $3 million that we were going to have to utilize in a constructive manner. So if you look at the list, it gives you a breakdown of a lot of what we were looking at to help us with this. There was a decision made to replace the MacBooks at the high school. They are currently 4 years old, and as everybody knows, Mac designs their stuff for the last 4 years, and after that, it's all a sort of a crapshoot as to whether or not it'll still stay running. Rather than take that opportunity, or rather than take that chance, we made the opportunity to spend probably a little bit over $1 million to replace those iPads, or not iPads, but the Macs for the high school. We are also looking at charging stations and headsets for the elementary kids. Looking for stylus pens and things, as you can see, that are helping us with enhancing the educational. We'll also be doing some program purchasing to help us with mathematics and arts, so that we'll be upgrading those and doing some professional development. As far as the safety and security upgrades, we're looking at enhancing the security and safety at the Walton School by putting the project for putting the bus loop in. We've had that conversation before about, why we would do it, safety of the kids, and utilization of the bus loops and having them too near the set. And we did bring up that, we were concerned about the traffic in that area, so we had those questions answered also. We also put 2 new school buses in and 5 vans. Reasoning behind that is we are looking currently of not having enough vehicles to do what we need to. The 2 buses just gives us that much more opportunity. And the vans also, instead of using buses, the vans allow us to use a smaller vehicle, not as much wear and tear, to be able to do the things that we need to do.
You don't need a bus driver license, right? You also don't need a certain license to ride the vans.
Anytime you put a corporation name on or a school name, Billy, tell me if I'm wrong, but anytime you put a school or anybody, it still requires a commercial license? Not in Maine? Just for the buses then? Okay, so the vans will still be.
I think you have to be deputized or sort of given some type of permission.
Bus permission, yeah. And then the rest of the cost, we look at nutrition, equipment that we were going to need, and then some auto scrubbers. So we probably have a little money left over, but I'm sure we'll discuss that, and we will be voting on this later on tonight. Any questions?
I'm actually going to move the motion up now for it's F, it's one of the very last items, but while we're having the conversation right now, so can I entertain a motion to approve the expenditures of CRF2 funds as detailed in the memorandum, so which is just everything that Councilor Mr. Carrier has gone over with us. Motion? Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pam. All right, any questions, comments, debate? All right, seeing none, take a vote. All those in favor? Approving CRF funds as stated? And opposed? Motion passed. All right, thank you. Pull it back. All right, policy policy subcommittee, we have policies that are coming up in just a few moments, so I would assume that's all part of this. Okay, all right.
Next week, yeah, next Tuesday.
Okay. For myself, curriculum subcommittee, we meet next week, right, Shelley? Next week? Okay. Subcommittee next week. Anyone else from any of the other committees need to report out? All right, seeing none, let's move on to new business. Policies. We have several policies that are on the agenda this evening. Michelle, anything you want to dip into first before I start asking for motions or calls on these?
Just ready to answer any questions that.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to go through them one by one, ladies and gentlemen. First one, policy CBI E3, evaluation of the superintendent timeline. Can I entertain a motion to approve policy CBI E3? Thank you, Mr. Belknap. In a second. Thank you, Brian Carrier. Any conversation? Great, this is the one where we changed the policy from the arrows to the really nice timed up. All right, awesome. Take a vote. All those in favor of policy CBI E3? All those seeing none opposed, motion passes. Next one, policy ECA, school safety and security, video safety cameras. Can I entertain a motion to approve policy ECA, school safety and security, video safety cameras for a first read?
So moved.
Over here, Mr. Carrier, Faith as a second. Any questions, comments, debate about that policy? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that motion passes. Policy ECA-R, school safety. These are the procedures that go along with the policy. So can I entertain a motion for the procedure? Thank you, Mr. Carrier. Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Questions, comments, debate? Seeing none, take a roll call vote. Not roll call vote. All those in favor? None opposed, motion passes. Policy EHB, school records and retention policy. Can I entertain a motion to approve policy EHB?
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Mr. Belknap. All those in favor? Thank you, motion passes. Policy EHB-R, these are the guidelines and the schedules. Can I entertain a motion to, this one is to delete. So this one, just make sure that you understand that this is a deletion. It's a motion to delete policy EHB. Can I entertain a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Thank you, Dave Simpson. Any questions, comments, debate on that one? All right, all those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. And we've already done the CRF funds. So we're up to the end of the meeting. Upcoming meetings we have on October 21st, 7 p.m. is a regular meeting. Future agenda items, I do have on there the delegate nominee as well as your feedback on the resolutions. Anyone else have anything that they would like to see added to future agendas?
Karen, do we have a workshop on the 21st? Or didn't we discuss starting meetings at 6 instead of 7? I thought that's when.
If there was no workshop, we started.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So 6 then?
So there's no workshop that I have in any of my notes.
I didn't
Right.
have it either.
So we can start at 6.
I just had it, yeah, we were
Yep.
starting at 6. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for catching that, Faith. All right. Seeing none, or if you think of something afterwards, you can either email myself or Dr. Brown. All right, can I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
So moved.
Belknap, second.
Second.
Pam, all those in favor to adjourn? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.